We have Dave here. Dave Ruderman?
Yes, that's it.
Nailed it. And today he is going to be presenting your Google reflection. And so now I'm going to hand it off to him.
Okay. Hey there. Most of what we're going to do is going to be like a PowerPoint, but we'll have questions at the end, about a half hour. Maybe we'll get started. Let's see, I gotta share my PowerPoint and off we go. Here you go. It's, I'm sure you all can see that, and maybe you got a little picture of me on one side, kind of hiding there. And you could always slide it to make me bigger or smaller, I think. Anyway, I'm Dave Ruderman. I work at UMass, and I'm part of the Marcom, University Marcom, which is part of University Relations. And I work on a team that does many of the websites at UMass. And I've dealt with search, and that's what this talk is about. It's really Google search. So I feel like, you know, it's going to sound very brand oriented, like I love Google, which, but I think we're kind of stuck with them. So, and maybe I do love Google, who knows? I've been dealing with search and I was thinking about it a little earlier. Web search, 25 years, I think. That sounds weird, I know, but I'm older than I look, so. Anyway, today I'm going to talk about Google search, the search engine result page, the page you get when you search. Google Search Console, which is a tool from Google that lets you find out what's going on over at search, and Google My Business, which is a bunch of different things, sort of a Frankenstein of having your business have a place on search. I'll hopefully explain that later. Let's see. There you go. So hopefully you're here because you care about your website. You have a website. Your website represents, it's not a blog, although this could help you a little bit with a blog, but you have an organization, a business, a thing, a product, you have an information service, you have a store, maybe you have a chain of stores, something like that. And you want to know what's going on at search, at Google search, over at google.com, because you might already have analytics on your website. You might already be looking at your website and paying attention to it, but you maybe don't know what's happening over at Google. And I'll keep saying over at Google because this is not your website. And maybe you can manage some things going on over there and improve search. And I have to figure out how to change slides better. Google has a lot of products, and these are just the business products that they list. And again, Google My Business and Search Console. I deal with Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager and some of these other things every day. There's a lot more. So you go to Google, you better have seen this page a long time ago, you know, and you do a search. Okay, you do a search, and I search for something particular, Fitzgerald Lake Conservation Area. That's because it's a wildlife area in Northampton, Massachusetts, and it is managed by Broadbrook Coalition, and that organization's a nonprofit with a website, and I volunteer with that nonprofit, so feel free to visit the conservation area or donate or join the Broadbrook Coalition, but mainly because it's a good example of what I want to talk about. So here's the search engine result page, which in the business is called SERP. And you can see I search for Fitzgerald Lake Conservation Area, and at the top is a result for Broadbrook Coalition, but it's their About Fitzgerald Lake page, because everything on that website is about Fitzgerald Lake. There is no Fitzgerald Lake website. So I'm going to give you a tour of this. You search for a concept, you get how to, bake chocolate chip cookies or whatever, and you'll see recipes. So here you are getting search results. You can also do a map search, which would search for that in a map context, an image search, which would search for, and you can see these highlighted areas on this page here, right, in yellow, which probably would search for pictures about it, and you can see some pictures right there on this page, and a news search, which would search for news stories about Fitzgerald Lake Conservation Area. Google, also this search page, knows whether I'm logged in or not to Gmail or Google. It also will know often where I am. So you can see off on the right is a different thing, right? You see the picture, the map. That is called the knowledge graph or the knowledge panel. And that has information about this thing, which is a point on Earth, which is this wildlife area. And there's a link to go to the website that is associated with that thing, which, and this might be a business, directions to that location. That's the pin on the map. Save, we'll actually save it to you if you're logged in to your kind of as a bookmark kind of thing. And then we're getting to some important bits. Down lower, it says suggest and edit or and own this business. Those are both links. Suggest and edit will be an opportunity for you to contribute and update to this information in the knowledge graph. And own this business will prompt you to join the other thing I'm going to talk about, Google My Business, and say you actually own this thing, like this business, whatever. And there's another neat one there, add a phone number. Maybe we'll talk about that. We will definitely in a minute. And if you scroll down, there's even more here. So there's a little graph of, you can see on the right, it's usually not busy at 3 o'clock. So this is a little map from Google. They actually have been paying attention to who's running Google Maps and is on their smartphone. And they know when people are at that location. And they have this lovely graph, which is a little creepy. So, and you get an opportunity to write a review. Some of you may have reviewed a restaurant or something like that, right? So you can actually do a review, give it stars, and post a picture. Woohoo! Let's see what else we got. So I told you I work at UMass. This is a search for UMass Amherst. You see different stuff here. Google knows that's a university. It knows that UMass is a giant university with a lot to offer. Even the menu, the tabs under search that are in yellow on the left, news, images, videos, etc., are in different order. And there's a reason for that. So if you hit news, there's, of course, it's going to search news for UMass Amherst. But UMass Amherst also has a news office. So it actually has news that shows up in there. So there's actual UMass Amherst news, just like the New York Times is in there, and the Washington Post, and some other sources. Images, what you expect will happen, and videos, videos that are about UMass Amherst. And again, UMass has a video channel. On the right, you can see the more of those in the knowledge panel, that thing on the right. you can see, I highlighted see photos. If we click through there, we would get a list of photos. And one of those, there'd be a tab at the top of the list by owner. And those are photos that belong to this thing, the University of Massachusetts Amherst. And then down on the bottom right, you see a phone number. How about that? You could actually click on that phone number and it will make a phone call. That's miraculous, but if you're on your cell phone, it will actually dial the phone. And if you're on your computer and don't do that now, it'll pop up your whatever you install to handle phone calls on, even on your computer. If you scroll to the, we're scrolling down on the same page, there's a lot more stuff. Google has taken the search page. It's no longer your mother's search page. It's full of aggregated information, some of which you have control over it, but most of it you don't. So top stories about UMass and so on. And there's even more notable alumni and those pictures, kind of crazy. All right, this is from a movie called Being John Malkovich. I'm sure you've all seen this. No, I'm not sure of that. But in that movie, the movie is about people who discover a way to go inside John Malkovich's brain without his permission and experience what it's like to be there. So we're going to go on the other side of Google search and see what's going on. And to do that, we're going to look first at Google Search Console, and then we're going to look at Google My Business. So for Google Search Console, and the link was on the previous slide, but I'll have it later, but you can also search for it. You'll first show up with a screen like this with nothing displayed, because you need to add a property. Property would be your website, and it has to be your website, a website you have the rights to, because Google Search Console will make you verify it, it'll make you prove it. So in this case, it's, you can see 4 things, but Broad Brook Coalition as HTTPS, that's the SSL URL, and HTTP, and also the domain, which says not verified, but we'll take a look at this. And the first screen on Search Console gives you a summary, but we'll move along. So you can add a property, and you click that add property link on the prior screen and take you to this screen, and you're gonna either put in information about your domain, which really requires you to have access to your DNS settings, so you're not going to do that, or your URL prefix, which hopefully you put in your main URL, your SSL URL, and hopefully you've got your website set up to do that, right? So, and then you can verify your URL one of 5 ways, but basically you're putting a tag on your website. All of this is really well documented by Google about Google Search Console, all of it. Let's see. So and I'm going to be flipping back and forth between Broad Brook Coalition and UMass on some of these things. So in Search Console, you're going to see, and this is the most common page I go to, what are the top queries over at google.com for your site. You really can't easily get this any other way. So, of course, and not surprisingly, as you kind of saw earlier, Fitzgerald Lake is the top search query that brings people to either, and I'll kind of bring you through here, click through, that's the total clicks or the click column, or see a result containing your site. So that's what impressions are. So they may not have clicked on your site, but your site, your amazing little site, showed up, in this case, in the last 3 months, almost 20,000 times in search, and was clicked through 848 times. That's awesome. And your click-through rate is 4.3%. Click-through rate, or CTR, it's the clicks divided by impressions. And then, and you want that to be as high as possible. This is pretty high considering how big the internet is. But people are more specifically, you can see, they're looking for this thing. And then average position is where you showed up on search, as in, and you're better off looking at the bottom right column. 1.7, that first one, it's more or less the first page, the 7th result. Now, all of these are averages, and they include things that don't have pages, like, you know, you can search Google through an app, right? Lots of other searches use Google. So I'm going to move a little faster. You can filter this by web search type. So we were seeing a web search, which is, you know, mainly what we're interested in, image, video, or news. And news in this case is, oh, and you could, where your content shows up in a news search, right? And you can further refine all this by country, by page, so you can actually drill down and find out how a particular page is performing in this context. Device, mobile or web, and search appearance, whether the search context, whether they did a web search or they did some other kind of search. Oops, sorry, I think I skipped something. Yeah, so back to here. So you can see the pages, and you broken down on this report, and the top page in this case is a PDF. So possibly, probably your site, you don't know how often PDFs are being loaded, because you might have Google Analytics on your site, you know how often web pages are being requested. But this is a way to find out how often your documents are. That'll come in handy. Okay, so on the left, you see this section called index. Index is how, because before we were looking at analytics, basically how search is doing, right? This is more about what Google, remember, to index your site, Google has a crawler, which is called Googlebot. This group of information tells you what Google thinks about the quality of your website and your URLs. This example is from UMass, and UMass has millions of web pages. And you can see there's actually lots of warnings and things, but in this case, Googlebot is saying, I've crawled your site, but or I wanted to crawl your site, but it's blocked by a robots.txt file. That sounds creepy, but a robot.txt file is something you could put up on your site, especially if you want only parts of it crawled. If you only want parts of it crawled, definitely add one to your site. That just search for that, and that could be explained to you. But it also tell you about this coverage reports about errors. And any of these details in the table, you can click on and get more information, actually drill down. I also recommend putting a sitemap on your site. Sitemap is a little XML file. If you're using Drupal or you know, another content management system, you can pretty easily have a sitemap that automatically generates. And it's basically saying, It's a file that says, hey, crawlers, and this works for all other crawlers too, not just Google. Hey, these pages were recently updated. Another thing you can do is actually take down pages from Google. You can remove them. Removals are temporary because there's sort of an agreement, and it makes sense that you took it off your website because, hey, if you're not going to take it off your website, I'm going to come back and search your web, index your website again. Removals take maybe a day or two to kick in and are good for like 6 months. So, but that'll just take it out of search. So if you're embarrassed about anything, you have an old document, last year's calendar, take it down and then have it removed here. Google also, and there's a hodgepodge of things here, they'll look at your site for usability. This is less about accessibility, but more about how usable your site is. In other words, they crawl the sites. Google is doing this now, crawling sites mobile first, meaning they will evaluate your content from as if they were a mobile browser first. And they also will render it, and they'll even render JavaScript applications. And in this case, the first error, text too small to read, implies that, and again, I'm not too worried about it because it says it's 3,860 pages, but UMass has millions of pages. So, you really need to evaluate it yourself. But anyway, text too small to read implies that if someone went to your site mobile, they might have to pinch or stretch or make the screen bigger to see something on the screen. But you could try it out, because if you click drill down, you'll see some example URLs that are having a problem. Google also reports security issues, meaning hacks like pages or compromised files uploaded to your site. This is really handy, especially if you didn't even know this. It's not a guarantee. And also, since it's a crawler, it's not going to just tell you the minute that it finds it. You might not find out for a day, a week later. A good way to find out if your site was hacked is to look at searches and find out that somebody's been searching for video game hacks on your site that has nothing to do with video games. And you can then drill down and find out what page might have caused that. Lastly, at least as far as this goes, Google Search Console used to be called Webmaster Tools, and the main thing you could do on that is test your site for being crawled, which you can do here, elsewhere, remove things, which I talked about already, and see who links to your site. So, and also see what your site links to. So in this case, there's, you can see 3 tables there. The top link pages, and I think you can click on each one of these and drill down, are the home page and some other things. And you can see who the top linking sites are, who link to your site. And Hilltown Families, which is one of the sponsors of NERD, the Nerd Summit, you can see down there, actually is one of the top links to Broadbrook Coalition, probably because families are visiting Fitzgerald Lake. And then you can see internal links on the right. It's a good way to see what's going on. All right. Next, I'm going to talk about Google My Business. And I'm just wondering how we're doing for time. All right, I better hurry along. Okay, Google My Business, as I said, is about the knowledge graph. That's the thing on the right on the search page, right? You can add a entity, which is a business, which is represented usually by a website. And then it has to be verified, and it has to be verified, in this case, absolutely different from Search Console. So either by email or a phone call, actual phone call to that number that they have, or an email that Google has, or by sending a postcard to the address they have. And if you don't have any of those things, then you can't be verified too easily. But if you get verified by a postcard, you might get lucky and get this in the mail and enter that code, and Bob's your uncle. You've got yourself a verified business. This is still not a verified business. So in Google My Business, you can do a lot of things. But one thing of note, and I've been seeing ads for this on TV, I cannot believe it. They don't say Google My Business, but they almost do, is you can indicate your business as a Black-owned business, which is kind of neat. That's a new thing that was added. And I think Google's been running ads, kind of an upsell to their business services. And in fact, one half of this is really useful, and half of this is a upsell to business services by Google. So like claim your free advertising, but then we want you to start paying for it, because I think the only way you can get it for free is by giving them a credit card. So UMass is verified, and look, we can get a $100 credit too. And you can see that they added this. You can add some sort of post about COVID that would be somewhere there in that knowledge graph. UMass is not a typical business, but you'll see these and all these sort of things I'm showing in typical business, but move along. You have an opportunity to update your info. In other words, I can change, and if I had a pizza place or a store, I can change the name of the business, the category. I can change the address. I could add the hours we're open, and do a few things. I can mark temporarily closed. Some of this popped up more recently because of COVID. A lot of businesses kind of changed the way they're doing things. Wait, I want to stick here for a sec. So about the info, this info may not show up for days or ever, because nothing here is certain. Google is having people approve it. So, but the neat thing here is to find out who is using that knowledge graph, who's clicking on the links, who's looking at the map links, how they got here. So you can see how they search for the links, and that knowledge graph to appear is here. And you can get analytics on that and actually drill down. When they see this, you can see how many visited your website from that part of the search result page, how many asked for directions, how many actually called you, and 708 people called UMass in the last month from the knowledge graph. Awesome. There's a heat map here on the right. Can you see it? And you can actually actually open it up to the region and the country and the world. How many people requested directions from various area? And it's awesome. There's more than you can believe. So when they made the phone calls, viewed your photos, the photos that you put up, not just photos. And you can see who reviewed you on Google. You can see that anyway because it's public information, but you can respond to the reviews, and I would only respond happily to reviews. If you were a hotel, you could go, hey, I'm sorry, the room was dirty, or I'm glad you enjoyed this stay. Photos is a neat thing because if you've never done this before, then none of your photos are your photos. So you can actually put up a photo that'll be the lead photo over there on the knowledge graph on the right. I'm going to go a little faster now because of time, right? Does that make sense? But you'll have an opportunity to put up photos. I suggest you do. And they'll become like the cover photo on the knowledge graph. You can see in the upper left for UMass, that photo there in 3 years has been seen 6.8 million times, not dollars. And that's a good thing because it's our photo, not a random other photo. All right. Oh, good, I made it to the end. All right, so some suggestions I have is to search for your site over, Google, then claim and validate your site on these two services. On Google Search Console, look at your queries, clicks, look at your actual pages that you care about in your content, and look for surprises, like you think everyone's doing X, but they're really doing Y. And based on all that, maybe you'll update your content. And then you can keep doing that. And then try to use on Search Console, well, in real life for your website, use one URL for your website. It's probably better as far as everything goes, analytics, Google Analytics, or even Search Console, but use the HTTPS domain if you can, because that's where everybody should be by now. I mentioned the robots.txt file. You could put one up or add no index files to content you don't want indexed or crawled, and the sitemap. And then Google My Business, really go through that and look at, see if what they call insights, see what is going on there. And be patient because none of this is real time. It all happens when Google feels like it. And be honest, because we're not trying to trick anybody about anything. All right, I'm going to stop sharing and we can take questions for, oh, right on time, for the remaining time we have.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
I do have one question that came through direct message during your presentation from Dan. He said, on the what's in it for Google, meaning if this is all free, what benefit are they getting? And maybe a follow-up, is there any downside to drinking the Google Kool-Aid?
Oh, good. I'm glad he didn't ask a question like, can you speak up or something like that. Otherwise, I will have missed that. Yeah, so what's in it for Google? Well, believe it or not, the people behind the scenes who run these tools, create these tools, actually really, really care about them being accurate. So they want you, especially in Google My Business, they really want you to correct the information because they're basically selling your information, right? Search is their thing, but it's an entryway to all their services. So they want you doing that, and they, over My Business, they want us leaning in and doing the upsell where we sign up for Google Ads and all that. And Search, they would rather take down things that and have people indicate what's bad there. Yeah. I've drunk the Google Kool-Aid occasionally. I do look at my Google history, my personal Google history. I have turned off various tracking things you can do in your browser. That's the personal Kool-Aid. The business Kool-Aid, Google is responsible for 90% of the search market. Like Bing is number 2, and Bing actually has tools like Search Console tools, which you could try out. Hey, 10% of a giant monolith, well, Bing isn't 10%, but 5% of a giant monolith, that's not bad either. So you could try that out too. Yeah,
Thank you.
All right, are there any other questions?
There better be, because I covered a lot. Well, let's see. And you can raise your hand or speak up, but so Google Search Console, there's lots of good documentation. Google My Business, there's documentation, it's not so great. Like Google Search, you know, the regular search, the results are pretty good. My Business, a little iffy. So if you went and, you know, we all Google ourselves, but Google your business, Google your business, and see if everything looks right. Like hover over those links, click through on all of them. I did this recently for, one department at UMass, and like, not all of it is right. They aggregate all sorts of information, and you have an opportunity to correct it, although it'll be challenging. All right, well, thanks everybody. There are other talks coming on 11. And I put my email up there, so anyone want to drop me an email, can. Other questions?